Hello, welcome back to today's lesson of 3D drawing, 3D drawing. In today's lesson I'm looking at making a start on the buffer here, and then we'll be mirroring it across to the other end. Now the interesting thing about these buffers is they actually pivot around and out of the way, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure why it does, I'm sure there's a reason. Potentially it's so that they can get closer to things to lift. But yeah, they completely swing around and pivot on this point here. So that's what we're going to be looking at drawing on today's lesson. Yeah, so if we jump into Fusion, we can have a look. We have to turn the canvas on, see what we've got in the way of drawings here. So you can see we've got the position and height of the buffers, which will be helpful. Do we have a top view? Let's have a look at that one. So we've got its position left and right here. There you can see it swings out and round. Obviously the position of this drawing would need to move across to be able to match it, because that's quite far over and out of position. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just edit this canvas. I'm going to bring this position over. So we can get the corner up here. I'm not going to be too worried about the center line for the moment. Because if you remember, we made this wider. So I'm trying to get this corner position so that we can get the position left and right where we want it to be. Okay, so one thing to note when looking at the position of the buffers here, at the jib end you can see you've got probably 3 or 4 inch gap between the edge of the buffer and the side frame here. If we scroll through to the picture at the other end, you can see it's aligned on the very end of the headboard here. So what we'll do is we'll probably draw this end first, because we know that's going to be needed position on the end, and then mirror it across to the other end. So looking at the design, what I'm thinking is just starting off with a rectangle as the back, and then drawing a circle or pipe that comes down the side here, and then we'll work the buffer forwards off of that. Okay, so we've got a nice clear view of the front of the buffer here. So we're going to create a sketch on this end plate here, and we're going to do a rectangle. We're going to follow this line here because that comes all the way through, and we're going to drag down on the end plate there. So there's our initial rectangle size. If we define this side 2.22, and before we define the distance across it, in fact, what we can do, no, actually before we do that, no, that'll be fine. It'll be fine. We'll do that. 3.3, and then we'll draw the lines on here. So they look like they start at this position, and you can see they're going down at what looks like that angle. So if we could put the angle in there, let's go 66, and we'll define the distance there, 0.45, and then the distance from there to there. That's already defined. It's that needs to find that distance there, and that distance there. Okay, and then we can do the same here. So line up on there. If we use that point there, because that's known, you see you get a little dash blue line coming up there. We can define the height there to there, 0.45, and then the angle was 66 degrees. So them two should be the same. So we can check that if we just look at that. It's 1.011, and then distance there to there. So they do look correct. Okay, so that's our basic shape of the buffer. So we shall extrude that. If we look on the end here, Okay, so we're going to bring it forwards. I'm going to go 0.4, so slightly more than the drawing. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the next thing we're going to draw is the rectangular backing plate of the buffer here. So again, we'll come onto this sketch, do a sketch on this surface we just created. We use the rectangle, it was going from that corner. We're just going to come all the way across and snap it in. Make sure it lines up the bottom line here. Snap it into that angle there. And we've got to find the position of the height. So we want this to be centered. So if we do click on the line, click midpoint, and then click on the large line, those will be centered height wise. Okay. Next thing is just define coincidence. Let's undo that. Define the height of it. Let's do that by doing this. So if we do that and define the distance there, because we don't know what height we need this to be yet, define that distance, it won't change its height. So we can just then coincidence the corner into that line. It's already snapped in this corner here. So that shows me that this isn't square or this isn't centered for some reason. So if we have a look at measurements here, that's 0.291. So that must be something to do with these. And I can already see I've just made a mistake because I've still got this radio check here. So we'll finish that sketch and we'll go and fix that. Okay, so I've got us back to where we were. I've moved everything across into the correct section on the crane chassis here. So we've now got this rectangle defined here. If I just show you what I've done on the sketch, if I edit the sketch, I've already in it. I've drawn the rectangle, constrained it to these 2 points with a distance of 0.29 from the bottom to the bottom of the folding out part of the buffer. So now we're just going to extrude this ever so slightly forwards just to give us a little bit of relief. More than anything else, we're just going to come forwards 0.1. That's realistically, it's just so that it looks like this. It's a separate part. That's the only reason I'm doing that. Okay, so the next thing, if we look side on, actually we'll put a bit on the photo, the circle part of the buffer shank goes all the way to top and bottom of that rectangle. So if we jump back into Fusion, spin this back round onto its side, and then we create a drawing on this smaller rectangle here, and using a center point circle, and we find the midpoint at the top and the side, and then drag this out so that we're matching the same diameter as we would be on the top and bottom of the rectangle we're drawn. Just define the distance there. Okay, and then we can extrude this forwards. We spin this round so we can see how far we want to come. So you can see how we've moved these forwards. So to compensate that, we'll just make this part of the shank go to the correct position, which will be shorter than what it is on the drawing, but it will compensate for the fact that we've moved these slightly outwards. Okay, so that's now drawn on. Where's this one to go? Okay, and then the next thing we need to look at is the inner part is slightly smaller, so we will draw that slightly smaller using the same technique. Create a circle on there and drag that out. Go for 1.3 millimeters, and then I'm going to drag this, extrude this forwards. Spin it around so we can see, and I'm going to bring it there to the back of the buffer. I think that's 0.8 millimeters. So if we have a look at the photo now, and we've just got to draw the buffer face on the front. Okay, so we're looking again to draw a sketch on this front face, and then find that midpoint, and then we'll drag the circle out. Zoom out, sorry, and you can see I'm just bringing it out to match the drawing. Okay, you can see how the drawing's slightly oval in shape. It could be that we're offset slightly, because this side's spot on all the way around here, then this part is slightly out. But we'll look at what we've got there. I think I'm happy with what it will look like. Select those two, and then extrude them the thickness of the buffer head. So 0.4, and then we'll fill it off the front surface just to round it out a little bit. It's only 0.1, it's not a massive amount, but it will make it look slightly curved. Okay, so the next thing we're going to draw is the bolt heads that go on here. So again, just jumping into Fusion, we only have to draw one of them if you remember, because we could just pattern the rest. So we'll create a sketch on that head here, and again, I'm going to draw on the same size as the rivets. They look pretty similar. Define the distance. 3. From there. 0.3 again. And then extrude this forwards. Normal mount 0.15 and round that off. Okay, and then we can just pattern this. Find the features. Direction will go sideways to start with. We're in 2 of them. And then we'll go too high as well. Okay. Okay, and the next thing we'll do is the hinge that goes down. So if we come into Fusion, for this I'm going to draw a sketch of this surface here, on the top here. And then just offset a circle from there. So find the midpoint, come out. I think I'm going to go 0.4 in radius. I'm going to bring that distance in slightly just so that it will print better. 5. And the distance from there. And I'm going to put that 0.18, just so there's a slight overlap here. I'm not worried about this hole coming up here, this will fill in with resin as it prints. But that bit will give us the circle shape we're looking for. We probably actually need to be bigger, if anything. Yeah, I might actually change those dimensions. I'm going to go, let's go 0.65, have a look at that. Yeah, because that's coming forwards on here. And we'll change this to 0.3. And we'll change that to 0.25. Yeah, I'm going to go with that, I think. Extrude from there to the bottom, and maybe give that a join. And the reason I've done that is, if we look at the picture, it's thinner in the middle. So I'm going to go in the middle here. I'm going to take some of this distance out and then add some at the top. So if we go back into Fusion, we need to Go back onto this sketch here, bring that up slightly, join. We're going to have to edit this other one and come down next to 0.2 on there. Okay, make sure they're all the same body. Yep. Okay, and then I'm going to create no, not a sketch. I want an offset plane from this face here, and create a sketch on that offset plane. I'm going to use the center point of that circle. It won't pick it up, typical. So if we find the circle, I'm going to go 0.4, and then we can constrain it to the midpoint. Should be able to, if we can find it. There. Okay, and then we select the profile on that inner one. I hope we want the outer one, sorry. Profile. No, wait a minute. Come back into that sketch. Let's go back in there. And 0.65 circle there. Then we select that profile after. And we can extrude that to this face here, which gives us that smaller radius center bit. I know it's chopped a bit out of this here, but I'm not going to worry about that because it's given us what looks like the gap going around the back in here. I want that hole there to be filled as well. We need to grab that profile there and extrude that upwards. Join. Yep, let's fill that in. Same on the bottom. No, we can't. What we can do, if you want to fill that back in, if you go back to this sketch here, which was, yeah, that one. Is that the right one? That profile, select that, and then extrude that downwards. To the bottom here, and tell it to join. That will fill in most of that gap that we had behind there, and then if you wanted, you could just loft from that profile to that profile, and that fills it in. I'm sure there's a neat way of doing that, but it shows you how you can go around fixing something that you may have done by mistake or not necessarily want, and then you fix it. Okay, so we can now turn that sketch off. We've got the buffer here in the shape that we want. Let's just check everything's drawn. There's a little bit on top of the buffer head here. Let's have a look, see if we've got a clearer picture. Hasn't, but it just looks like a little flap of metal on the top. To be fair, I think I'm just going to leave it off because it doesn't look particularly big. I don't think in Engage, I don't think we're going to notice it. If you were doing double O, you could maybe draw a little bit on there, but I think I'm going to leave that off. Okay, so now we want Onward to mirror this lot across. Okay, so if what we need is a midpoint or mid-plane. So go create a mid-plane from that face to that one. Okay, and then we need to select all the features that we've got here, and move them all across. So if we go to mirror, and we'll find the first feature, which is that one, and just select all of these lots. Not sure why it's not selecting that one. Oh, it's because with faces, features, that's what we want. That'll do it. There we go. Select all them. Mirror plane is going to be that center, and click on OK. So if we remember what we said, this end of the crane should be up against the side, and we should have a gap here. Excellent. Height wise, let's spin this slightly, zoom in there. Height wise, we look like we've got, let's have a look, 1.6 millimeters, so just under a foot. And that's, yeah, roughly matching with what I'm expecting to see there. Okay, so now we've got the buffers sorted. We'll call that enough for today's lesson, and then we'll look at something else on the next one. Hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. You've seen a few faux pas, things you may not want to do or things you could do differently. But we've now got to a point where we've got buffers on both ends of our crane, which is a step further forwards. Hope you've enjoyed watching. If you have, please make sure you press that like and subscribe button.